Hey gang, I'm glad you're here. Welcome back to another video here at Joe Daddy's Workshop. As you know, this channel is going to cover a variety of topics. A lot of it is do-it-yourself projects. It may be in the garage or in the home, different things like that. I've said it from the beginning, this is just going to be random stuff that I'm going to do. However, I've gotten some great videos out there and I've gotten some great feedback from a variety of videos that I never expected to see that kind of feedback. One was the Aaron's zero-turn lawnmower that I did a review on. But the other one was the door threshold. That video is doing outstanding, and I'm really surprised at how well it's doing. So I'm going to keep on making videos that in some ways may seem random, but they are projects. So this one is going to be a little bit different. This you see behind me, this is basically the framework for a deer feeder. And I had a friend ask me if I could help him rebuild. He has two of these, so help me rebuild his two deer feeders. Now I'm going to walk around and show you what's going on with this, but I always like working with metal. I always like these kind of fabrication projects because it allows me to get creative. I don't have to follow the rules that somebody else put in place when they built these things. I can find my own improvements or ways, to make it better. So I'm going to do a walk around and show you what the task is and kind of give you some idea as to what my thoughts are to make these a better project. All right, so I stepped back a bit so you could see what this actually looks like. This is something you would set off in a feed plot or your hunting location, and you would have a tray down here in the bottom that you would put corn in or whatever, and then the top would have a panel on top of it to keep the water out. And I don't know who made these. I don't know if these were store-bought. I don't know if somebody designed these themselves and built it. I don't know the background, and it doesn't matter. I just know that I have a task to do. Now, if you look at this, this is made of 1-inch square tubing, and it has a simple pitch roof on it that would deflect water and keep it out of the feeder. But the biggest problem is, I know it's hard to see because the floor doesn't have much color difference, but the legs rot off. So I think, obviously this can be improved upon. I think what has happened is, and if you look up here, you can see a gap at the top where that weld seam should be. And of course, it's open on the end here. But I'm assuming, I haven't looked, seen any other evidence, I'm assuming they just had open pipe on the end, and that allows for water to get inside and just causes it to rot. And you can just see how bad the corrosion is on this thing. So I don't know when they were built, if they were ever painted. I don't see any evidence of paint. Maybe up on the top piece I do see a little bit of black, but I'll assume that they were painted. It would make sense. But the thing is, when you have these openings, you can just get all kinds of junk in there. And obviously the legs can get water and stuff in pretty easily. So my fix is going to be building completely new ones. And I talked with the owner of these stands, and he went and got me, over there you see, 120 feet of 1-inch square tubing. This is stuff that I love. I just love having this kind of material just for a variety of things. Now, my plan is, as I said, I'm going to build the whole new stand. I'm going to put bases on the legs. I'm going to build this so there's no openings on the ends. And then one other thing that I noticed, and this is pretty obvious right here. You see this split? Okay, that's from ice, in my opinion. Water gets in here and it's trapped. Can't get out, and it just sits there, and it could be there for years, really. There's no easy way for this to vent, and water gets trapped in here and it starts rusting. And if it's hard to show you, but this whole piece of tubing here is bulged. So up here at the top, it's nice and square, but as we come down, it gets fatter and fatter and fatter and fatter. So to me, that's just ice has expanded that tubing. Now, what's odd about that to me is this top piece is under cover. At least I would assume. I don't know what the peak would be. You know, I don't know how this is designed, if there's just a panel that overlaps another panel from either side, because obviously there's screw holes up here, so something attaches. I don't know what it is. I'm just worried about the framework. But my thoughts are, why build it like this when I could easily use the same leg or build a new leg, but instead of having this piece drop in the top, I could add a piece or maybe two pieces of square tubing on the inside, relocate this leg inboard, and now I could cap this off up here and just have these two pieces that will hold the top part. I think that's a much better improvement. It looks like the rest of this, you know, this may not be that important that these ends are open. I don't think it's going to matter in this instance because this part is elevated, and obviously when it's being used, you know, something is covering it and protecting it. So now I can see there's some black paint right here. So obviously it was painted at some point. I don't know what with, but that's irrelevant. At this point, what I need to do is take some measurements and basically make my own version of this stand. Alright, so as you can see, I have my old chop saw. I think that's I don't know if it's a 12 or 14 inch, but I've had that chop saw for probably 20 years or more, and I just keep on using it. You know, it keeps on working, so no sense in replacing it. I think I bought that at Northern Tools. Anyway, I drew up a little map of what I'm going to build. So measuring the ID of the lower frame, it's 35.5 by 22.5, and that's just giving me the internal dimensions so I know what I'm dealing with. The legs are all 23.5, so I need 8 legs at 23.5, 4 upright pieces at 36 inches, and then I need 4 at 37.5, and I'm going to cut those at an angle, 45-degree angle on each end, so it'll be 37.5 overall. And then I need 4 at 24.5, again cut at an angle. And when I do this so that I can butt the corners together like a picture frame, and I'll weld those shut, and there won't be any gaps, or no air can get, or no water can get inside. So I'm going to start with cutting the 8 legs at 23.5 inches, because that's what the frame had originally. So 23.5 is what I'm going with. And by doing that, I can get all 8 legs out of one stick and have about 4 feet left over. That'll give me one of the uprights that I need to hold the top of the frame. So I'll start off cutting those 8 legs at 23.5 inches and then finish up the 36-inch pieces that I need to make the uprights. Alright, since I have the legs cut and the upright pieces cut, now I need the 4 at 37.5 and 4 at 24.5, and those are outside dimensions. Okay, so that's when I cut the angle, it'll be the outside that I want at that dimension. So to do that, I need to rotate this backstop that's on the cutter, and it's pretty simple. You know, you just break loose the retaining bolt on the pivot point, let's say, and then the clamping bolt, and that I always keep a little bit tighter. So then I'll let that pivot. Now ultimately what I'll do is I'll turn the whole saw, because I need to cut lengthwise, you know, the length of my garage. And by turning the saw, that makes it a lot easier. So this has an index on it that should already be at 45 degrees. Now, this saw, and I don't know if I've used any other saws like this. It's been a while, I'll say that. If I can get this. It has this little, the threaded part here has like a little tab, and you should be able to take that loose, but it's not going to agree with me right now. Okay, so I'm just going to back that off. And in theory, you know, if everything's right, you can take your little square here and set it up on that edge. And then, you know, if I had this all the way back, there it goes. So that thing's, now it breaks loose. I had to hit forward on it. Okay, so I can slide this back and check the angle. In this case, my little cover here, notice I didn't show you that very well, but the cover comes up really easy, and I can set it out to the side. It catches on top of the shield, the inner shield. So anyway, I can slide this back and verify that angle, and I can see it is just a little bit off, so I need to adjust it and make sure that my blade lines up, or my cutting disc, I should say. It's not really a blade. Make sure it lines up on my square, and once I'm confident with that, I can just tighten everything back down and go to cutting. All right, should be set. I'll bring in a piece and cut it, and we'll see how it looks. So I can take my square, lay it on here and get a look at it, and that's spot on, right on the money. So that's good. Now all I have to do is cut, you know, back cut each one of these to that length of 37.5 inches, and I'll be set. If you can't tell, what I'm doing is taking the blade and bringing it down on top of the tape measure so I get the exact measurement. Okay, so what we have now as I've shown obviously before, is the 4 short pieces of the box, the frame box that I'm building, the 4 long pieces for the box, the 8 legs, because I'm building 2 boxes, so 4 legs per, and then the 4 vertical uprights, and that is this piece on here. So the plan is, first of all, is I want to degrease all of these, because you can just see these gloves are covered in basically in oil that they put on this metal to keep it from rusting. So I'll probably wipe them all down with some lacquer thinner just to get rid of the oil, and then I will start building the frame. Now, what I like about this table that they're sitting on, this is a welding table from Harbor Freight, and it has these flanges on the side that I can raise up and create a 90-degree angle, and then I can just clamp the pieces down and weld them together. So this is going to be very nice for building this framework. Along with that, I will be using my Millermatic 140T welder, and normally I use .023 or .025 wire when I'm welding sheet metal on cars. I'm going to convert that over to .030 because I want to go a little heavier and burn in a little hotter to make these connections or make these welds. So I'm going to get these cleaned up and then swap out that wire, and we'll start putting these together. Alright, so at this point I want to show this table, as I was saying, has this little side plate that I can bring up. I had it up earlier when I was grinding the edges to make sure everything was square. And it also has, and it also has one on the back. So I'll loosen that up, raise that, and by doing this, hopefully, I'll check it with my framing square. It'll give me a 90-degree angle. So I'll put the framing square in there. And it is 90 degrees, good to go. So I will continue to use this though. I'll have this keep this close by and double check things. Now as I put this together, I'm also going to double check my measurements because I have a layout for the grid and I'm more concerned with the internal dimensions than the external dimensions because that's where that tray or whatever goes inside of this needs to fit. So that's the important part. So I'm going to start with one long leg again in this corner or against this back edge, and then a short leg. That's going to give me, and I'll show it to you, a nice 90-degree angle. Alright, so there's the corner, and you can see those pieces fit perfectly together. This one's nice and tight against the short leg of the table, and this one's nice and tight against the long leg. And what I'll do at this point is put a clamp on these to make sure they don't move and weld this together. I may start with some tacks, I don't know yet, but we'll figure that out when I get to that point. Man, that fits nice. And again, I'm using the 30 thousandths welding wire. Currently, I have the MIG set on. I'm going to turn the heat up to C, or the third setting on this welder, and the speed is at 2. So we'll see what it does. I'll give it a shot. Oh, I love welding stuff like this. You can turn the speed down just a tiny bit. I like it. Now I just need to repeat this several times. I thought I would show you what I had to do here. In order for this to fit, this is obviously larger than the table that I'm using. I had to put an extension bar on the end of the table here. And really it was just a piece of the leftover scrap. And I leveled it with the table, extended it out, so now it supports this end that's hanging out over the table. And then the other thing that I did was a crisscross measurement. So I want to make sure it's square. And basically, if I can do this with one hand, so pulling on this corner to this corner, it's around 44 and 7/8, really close to 44 and 7/8. And if I pull it across this way, vice grips are in the way, but it's within about a 1/16 of an inch. So as I like to say, I'm happy with that. This isn't, the space shuttle. So the measurement across, what I need on the inside is 35.5. So that's consistent, and that's a good thing. And then going the other way, I believe it was 22.5. And so, whoops, there's that measurement as well. (22 1/2). So now all I have to do is weld this together. Repeat this one more time, and I'll have both of the base frames together. And of course, it's going to pull a little bit just from the welding, but I will get everything square once again, do another crisscross measurement, and then weld this together as well. Alright, so both frames or bases are welded together, and I really like welding this kind of metal. It's just really so forgiving. You can just kind of stop and restart if you want to, and it just flows so nice. So the next step for me is I want to grind down these welds, because the leg has to attach onto that corner, for those legs. And I'm going to be using this. This is the 4.5 inch Bad Dog disc from Bad Dog Tools. And these are not cheap. They say they come with a lifetime guarantee. Right there in the corner of the package, and I think this disc is like $130 or something, but it's diamond coated or covered or whatever you want to label that, and I've used it quite a bit. It's really awesome. So I'm going to use that to grind down these welds and then move on to getting the legs in place. In case you're wondering what all the background noise is while I'm in the shop, that lot across the street is being cleared for a house. So that dozer is kicking off or dumping off all the stumps and logs and whatnot left over from them clearing the lot. So that's what the noises are. not sure if you can hear, but it's pouring down rain outside. Alright, so the frame is all blended, you know, all the corners are blended off nice. I like to have things cleaned up as best I can. And, you know, I just cleaned up the end of the legs. So now what I want to do is get these legs in place, and I'm going to use these little corner magnets. Now, these are pretty generic. I think I picked these up at Harbor Freight years ago. They make better ones, but for this task, this will be fine. And you can see it has a bunch of, probably see, I don't know, it collects grinding dust and junk in them. That's always hard to get out. But as long as your edges are clean, it'll be fine. So what I want to do is get these on the base piece, and then get the leg in position, get it out to the corner where I want it, and I'm just going to walk these in a little bit and try to get it to get right on the corner. So in this way, everything should be square. Should be. So we'll look at it from a different angle in just a second. So there you can see, nice 90-degree angle. And I can move that leg out just a little bit, maybe closer to the edge. And your position, or your square to this corner, will change based on how you have these, because basically you have, you know, two edges here that need to be square to the leg, and then this angle, not only, you know, this flat edge here, but I'm saying the angle that you position these will also affect the position of the leg. Hope that makes sense. But it's, you know, again, this isn't super critical, but I like to have things square and correct. So I will manipulate the leg as I need to get it exactly where I want it, and then weld it in place. I'm showing just maybe a little bit off, you know, over that span from here to the top, using this framing square, maybe 1/8 of an inch. So I can manipulate that whenever I tack it. Hold that up against the square. I know you can't see the top, but I'm holding it against the square at the top, and then tack this corner. And that edge is nice. So I'll hold this in place. Trying to do the best I can to make it as square as possible. Nice. Like butter. And now I'll repeat that on the other 3 legs. Okay, so you can see now I have 2 really nice square bases. And before I add the vertical piece to make, you know, the standoff for the covering that'll go over it, I want to do something else. I want to cap off the end of the legs. So I have this piece of 1-inch flat stock, and it's left over from another project, but what I'll do is cut off like 1-inch squares and then weld those to the bottom of the leg and make sure I weld the full perimeter, and that way that leg is now airtight, and that'll keep the water from getting into it and causing rust and causing the bottom of the legs to fail. Alright, so I've ground these down, you know, they're roughly 1 inch. And like I said, these are going to go on top or the bottom of the leg, and I'm going to weld those on. So I'm going to get the bases set up on this table, and then set these on top of each leg and weld them on. do a little bit of prep work. I guess you can see that. There we go. I'm not going to put my finger on that because it'll get hot. So, you get the idea. Okay, now that I have the legs taken care of, the next thing I want to do, which I've already done on this first one, is add the uprights. So I'll set this one up on the table. And the next step, again, will be welding these uprights in place. So let me reset the camera so you can see what I'm going to do. So as I said, there's going to be, two upright pieces, 36 inches tall. So I had to find the center, which is pretty simple. Just measured outside to outside, split the difference, made the center line, and I'll do the same thing. I've done it on that side already, but I'll do it on this side as well. And since the distance is 24.5 inches, simply 12.25 is the center line. And then I'm going to measure 1/2 inch either side to that, which will give me my 1 inch width for the piece of tubing that's going to go on. So I'm going to mark that on the outside as well, because I need to clean this metal off so that when I go to weld, it'll weld better. And the reason I put the marks on the outside, because I'm going to blend off the marks that I just put on top. Now I'm going to do the same thing to the legs. Make sure the ends are clean. One thing I didn't do yesterday or on the last segment was put on my jacket. And I probably should have done that. I know I was welding a lot with my arms up, and I'll point that out because I ended up with a little bit of it's technically, I guess, a radiation burn right here on my arm. So just note to self, protect yourself when you can. So again, I'm going to use the magnetic angle pieces, find the center point that I want, and I'm going to put one on the outside and one on the inside, or on a side to that, 90 degrees, I guess I should say. And then I'll verify my dimensions side to side, so I want to make sure I'm on the center. And then the other part of this is I want to make sure that I'm square. Now, I know those little pieces should hold at a 90-degree angle, but I don't trust them. I'd rather trust my framing square, and that's got a little bit off, but there it is. So that takes care of that dimension or that angle, and then I'll also put it on the inside, and I can see it's I know you can't see, but there's actually a gap right now between the leg and the square. So I'm going to need to push in a little bit on that to make up for that gap. Now what I'll do is I'll hold this against the square and tack it so that it'll stay in place. And let's get ready to do that. Perfect. Now I'll just do that on the other side, and then we'll move on from there. Well, I couldn't resist. I wanted to do a test fit and see how close I got with my design, or my construction, versus the original piece that would fit the other one, and it slipped right together as I expected it should. Now, as I've said before, I don't like this design. It makes sense, it's pretty simple, and if you're just doing this kind of like a production level thing where you just want to get these out, that's a good way to do it. But I don't like it because water will work its way down in here and it can't get out the bottom. And the alternative would be, put in some sort of a drain, something like that, but I just don't like the idea. It'll eventually clog up and cause it to rust inside. So, like I was saying before, do a visual here. I'll weld on a piece here to the inside and just cut it off. It'll be about 6 inches long maybe, and just move the new construction piece. This bar stock, I'll move it just inboard and weld it on, and that way it has, water can't collect in it. And I think that's just going to be an improvement. And I will also cap these off, just like I did on the feet for the legs. I'll make little 1-inch pieces and weld that solid so that that'll never rust inside. At least it never should. So that'll be the next thing I do, is build this top portion. Now, I probably won't go through show you the process of cutting this stuff up, but it's a matter of measuring. So this dimension from the edge here to the peak, I worked it out, it's 24 inches. And you can see they have holes where they had attached something on top of this. So there is a little bit of play here, but not much. I'm going to assume they want to go back the same way they had it. So I'm going to make that dimension 24 inches from here to here. And then I measured, and from the bottom edge to the inside of the peak, it was 23 1/4. So that's just a nice simple reference that I can use to try to replicate this angle. Now this side is a little bit off. I think this side, one of the two I looked at, the angle was quite a bit different. Maybe it was the other side, but anyway, you get the idea. By doing that measurement, I get a line that I can reference and cut to that line, and then I get this same angle. And then of course the rest of it is cutting these pieces, which I believe are 48 inches. So that'll give me, 3 pieces of 48. And I don't know if I'm going to worry about capping these off or not, because it's very difficult for moisture and water to work its way up. The only other thing would be maybe, and I doubt it would be much, but maybe bees or something try to get in there. So I'll visit that as I go along. I may consider doing that same angle deal that I did with the corners down here, and just make the whole thing airtight. So here I have the 6 pieces. That'll be the vertical piece that goes inside of the vertical post, so up there at the top. And then I have 8 pieces that will create the roof portion of the cover. So I have 8 of these. And then I also cut 6 pieces, and these are 48 inches long, for the center section of the roof in the center, and also these ends. I decided I'm going to leave these open. I figured if there was any water that got in around the screws, that it needs to be able to get out and dry out. So I'm just going to leave these ends open and build them just like these are, other than moving those posts that I talked about for the slip-in portion. So what I've done, as I said earlier, the peak is 24 inches. So I cut these long. These are actually 24 1/2. So I drew a line, from that end to 24, and then 23 3/4, and I'll just set up the saw to where it matches that angle, and then I'll cut all of these to the same dimension. I thought I would show you this little tip. Once I got the first length established exactly how I wanted it, and I measured it and made sure that the angle is what I wanted, I had put this block, this is like a 25-pound weight that I set up, and I use it as a stop. So as long as I don't move anything, and I carefully remove the bar stock or the tubing and just butt the next piece up against, I'll replicate every cut. So just a simple little tip you might find useful. All right, so you can see I have, various pieces laying on the table, but I want to talk about these 6-inch pieces that will be supporting the roof when I weld them inboard on the vertical legs. When I cut these with a chop saw, they end up with burrs all the way around, excess material that will cause problems whenever I try to slide something in there. So before I weld this on, I want to make sure these are clean on both ends, because once it's on, it's going to be tougher to get to the bottom with any kind of tool. But now that they're out in the open, I can clean them up. And I'm going to use this. This is what we call a rotary file, or some people may say a burr. It's basically just a little round file tool that you can get for your air grinder. And I will go around the perimeter and knock off that high metal. So let me get some gear on and I'll show you. So basically I'll just come inside, and it might kind of try to dance on me a little bit because it's going to catch those edges and want to pull itself around, but we'll see what happens. Much better. That was the end. That was probably cut with a saw, so I don't have to mess with that. Okay, so things are coming together, and the last thing I need to build is the little roof. And as I showed, I cut these pieces. I have 8 of them to make the ends, and I wanted to go into some detail as to a way you could do this on this little metal table. And I started with the idea of taking 2x4s, and I would place them on the table, clamp them down, and create basically a jig, so that each one would be the same. And by doing that, I could, clamp the 2x4s, put the square tubing in place, get the angle that I want, a lot of stuff to make it happen. And then I thought, why am I going to do that? There's an easier way. But the point being that if you were building one of these on your own, do something like this. You could take the 2x4s, clamp them down, get the angles you want, put a second 2x4 on the outside, and then each piece that you put into this is going to match up and do the same thing. In my case, I don't need to do this. And let me show you what I'm going to do instead. I already have a template. This piece. All I have to do, and this is going to be so simple, is take each leg that I've already cut, and I did grind off the weld that was on the top here, so there was no hump, and just place these on top, make sure my lengths are the same on each end. My angle is already dead on, I'll show you that in a second, and then just clamp these, weld it in place, and I'm done, and I can just replicate all those pieces much quicker. So as you can see, I just line that up on top. I'll put some clamps on it. That angle that I predicted, dead on, and that's going to be it. So all I have to do, clamp up and start welding, and that'll give me each end for the little roof. Alright, so I have these made. I did not weld the inner seam, and I didn't do that for a reason, because I'm going to be butting that center piece up, the cross piece. So my goal here is to get the outer legs attached, or the outer cross pieces attached to the base of the end caps. Alright, so what I plan to do, or what I'm doing, is I've clamped the end piece into the table, clamped it onto the table, and then I'll add this piece and that's going to give me that butt end that I wanted to do, and I'll just weld those together. So I'm going to bring this little flange up on the back of the table. I already have it up on this side, so I'll bring it up on the back just to keep it in place. And that's going to give you the 90-degree angle that I want. Pretty simple that way. Now, of course, it'll take some figuring to get switched around on the table so that I can make the other connections. Alright, so there's the ends that are welded together on opposite corners. And what I did is I clamped a piece of, what I did is I clamped a piece of leftover material onto the leg of the long piece, and then you can just see I clamped the short leg, or the end cap, let's say, to that piece. Same thing on the other end, and I think that's going to get everything right where I need it. And of course, just weld it up. I want to point this out before I go too much further. I did cross measuring from point to point, and it was a little bit off. So what I did is I put a strap on the long ends and pulled it together a little bit to get matching cross points. So now I can weld it. Alright, I have the perimeter made. Now what I want to do is stand this up, take the last piece and fit it in. Now, of course, it's not going to fit square because we're dealing with an angle. So I'm going to piece that in, and then it's kind of one of those where you got to find the happy spot where things line up in such a way that you don't have too much corner sticking out at the top. So I'm going to go a little bit below that edge and create a little pocket down here in the bottom, and that's all I really need to do. I mean, it's lined up pretty close. Yep. Now, of course, there's probably some way you could put a square in here and do some cross measuring, but I'm not going to worry about that. If I can eyeball that it's equal angles, then I'm okay with it. And I'm okay with it. There we go. Now all I have to do is finish welding in the corners and the top, and the roof pieces will be pretty much ready to go, other than the center posts that are going to hold everything to the other half, or to the bottom half. And then the other thing that I'll do is grind off this top weld at the peak so that whatever panels they put on here don't get bound. I know it's kind of small detail, but it's things that I do to try to make things as good as I can. Okay, so as I'm getting ready to finish up building the top hats, or whatever you want to call it, I need the vertical pieces, and I cut those off of the other tops. So 3/4 inch bar stock. But one of my ideas is to make this more user friendly. I noticed whenever I was inserting this or trying to remove this from the original pieces, this bound up really fast. You know, this is a square piece going into a square hole, which is fine, but when you start coming in at an angle, it can bind really quick. So one of the things I've done, and I'll just show you one of the more finished ones, is I've tapered the end. And the idea is, of course, that whenever you're trying to put this together, you know, you're trying to put a square into a square, but with a little bit of taper. Now this still has some edge on it from where it's not been ground out, but when you have a taper, it'll help you center up and go into the hole easier. So I'm going to shape this with this Bad Dog disc, and I'll point this out. I have this on my Amazon page. They're not cheap, but they come with a lifetime guarantee, and I've been using this thing continuously for quite some time. No issues with it, so let me just show you how it works. Pretty quick. Now I'm going to clean up the rest of these edges as well before I put things together. I'll just repeat the same process. Alright, so I want to talk about this part, or this next sequence, for a minute here. What I've done on these edges where I added these inner pieces, I filled all of this with seam sealer because I didn't want any water to get trapped in between and cause rust. So these are all sealed up. And what I want to do is set the, for lack of a better term, the roof piece or roof panel or whatever you want to call it on top of these pieces. But the trouble is I need to insert these, weld these on, and to be able to weld them, they're going to need some clearance, right? Because I can't have everything sit flush and try to weld this. It's not going to work. But I need to make this the same height. So what I will do, and this is another advantage too, because I have these open, I can slide these in from the bottom and get them exactly where I want them, position them, and weld them in place, and go from there. So what I will do at this point, and I need to find some pieces of scrap, this may work, I want to set a piece up here on top, and I could probably just set it. Well, I can't because the length is this way, so I can't do that. Let me get a smaller piece. I've got some of these little pieces that are left over from where I cut the ends off, the angles off. And then, once I have these two in place, I can set the top piece on. See if I can do this without knocking everything off. Now, what I probably should have done and been a little more proactive is taking some measurements and come up with a center line, you know, on these posts. But what I can do is kind of guesstimate, and this one's about 6 inches. We'll see where this one's at. Oh, I'm only off 3/16. That's not bad. So I just need to move it a little bit, if at all, really. Not going to matter. And also these little blocks will help me center the hat, or the top, the roof, whatever you want to call it. With that in place, the only other thing I'll do this, it's probably not going to be that critical, but I'll do some drop measurements off of the ends here just to see where I'm at. And if I need to adjust a little, I will. But again, it's probably not that critical. I just know how I am. Yeah, it's really almost, look, within a quarter inch. So I think I'm just gonna let it go. What? All right, at this point, what I want to do is attach the ground, and I think I'll just try going to this main post right here. Get that attached, and then get the welder on. Get out my hood and my gun. So like I was saying, at this point, I may not have the camera angled the way it should be, but let me back over this way a little bit. At this point, in all theory, if everything's correct, I should be able to come up through the bottom. Get that where it feels like it's centered in that hole. And tack it in. What do you think of that? Now we'll repeat that on the other side. Now, another thing that I could consider doing, but I probably won't, is adding those spacers up on top, the little 1-inch cubes, just so that when this fits down in, you know, this weld is going to want to sit on this inner area here. So just trying to think about it when it's coming down, if it'll bind or not, but it should not bind. In fact, let's just check out these little spacers. Now, as I said, on the other one, I welded an X. So on this one, I welded an O right here. And then I welded an O on the end of the top. And they fit perfect. So you can see, maybe see where there's an O back here and an O here. Now, I may blend that down a little bit, I don't know yet, but that's the point though, is I can see those and know which way it's gonna fit for sure. It probably would fit the other way, but why not make it as easy to recognize as possible? Now at this point, I want to get these cleaned up. I'll probably wipe them down several times with lacquer thinner or alcohol or something along those lines. And then once I get those all cleaned up, I'm going to spray them down with black paint, and that'll be it. So I'll let you see what they look like afterwards. So I thought I would do one more walk around and just show it to you. Everything is working out really nice. And I'm pretty happy with that. I like to say that. When I'm happy with something, I'll let you know. I'm very happy with these. They take up a lot of space. They have a pretty good size footprint for in my shop. But You know, they turned out as I expected them to. You know, I think this is a improvement over what I was shown or what I was offered, you know, to work with. So very happy with these. Well, that's going to be the end of this video. Now, this probably took a little more time than I had anticipated, which is okay, but I tend to overthink or overbuild things, and I try to correct things that I find wrong, as in the previous design. You know, it had that water issue where it would trap and freeze and cause problems and rust. So I fixed that by adding in this little tube on the side, capping off the feet, getting rid of openings where the corners meet, stuff like that will make this last probably twice as long as the set that I was given as an example. So I don't know, I tend to try to think long term whenever I build things, because if I were building it for me, this is how I would do it. And that just makes it more practical in my mind. I will point out that I sprayed these with Iron Armor chassis and grill paint. And this is from Harbor Freight. I've used this on a variety of things and have had good luck with it. So I've put on 2 coats already, and I did have these apart and sprayed on top of the cap here and you know, underneath and all that stuff on this top piece. I still need to spray the bottom of the feet, and I'm thinking about maybe, I haven't decided yet if I'm going to do it. I had some brush on bed liner stuff that I used on my dune buggy. When I did the floor pan, I actually painted the inside with that bed liner stuff, and I know it's really tough and durable. So I'm actually thinking about doing that to the feet. Maybe, you know, come up 4 or 5 inches on the leg and the base of the feet and put on some of that material. But I haven't fully decided on that yet. You know how like I said, I tend to overthink things and overdo it on occasion. But hey, that's how you make a better product. That's how you make, you know, better whatever. You got to think about these things. So anyway, I'm going to call this the end, and I want to thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed, I ask that you do. Please leave a comment. Let me know what you think about stuff like this. You know, this channel is a variety of things, and it's going to continue to be that way. And if you have any ideas of something that may be a good video, leave a comment. Let me know what you think. I know I'm open to just about any suggestions, and I would like to hear from you as well. Anyway, stay tuned, stay safe, and until next time, take care of yourselves. See ya. I was tasked with building or helping a friend rebuild this one. And that way it'll cap it off and keep it airtight, and we don't have to worry about rust coming up the area of water. And mess up. Ta-da! Oh, kick the camera. So anyway, key states. All right, that's going to be the end of this video. Now,